This is a pleasure for me to introduce Daniel Christian Wahl. He's going to be speaking for the next 30 minutes. And this is a man who has been of a great inspiration for me on my personal journey into regenerative cultures. Daniel is originally trained as a biologist, and he holds degrees in both biology, holistic science, natural design from Edinburgh, Schumacher College and University of Dundee, respectively. Daniel has actually been the director of Findhorn College from 2007 to 2010 and is now living on Majorca, where he helped to set up SMART UIB, working locally and internationally as a consultant, educator, and activist. So he has had a wide range of clients, including Ecover, Forum for the Future, Camper, Lush, UNITAR, UK Foresight, and many other universities. Right now, he is on the academic working group of the Global Ecovillage Network and has been linked to GEN for almost 20 years already. Since 2007, he's been working closely with Gaia Education and is now teaching on the MA in Ecological Design Thinking at Schumacher College. And his book on Designing Regenerative Cultures has become almost a cult work for people in the regenerative world. And has quickly gained a lot of international attention. And I have to say, I'm also one of the followers of his blog on Medium, which has 20,000 other followers tuning in whenever he decides to share of his wisdom. So that said, welcome so much, Daniel. We're excited to have you, and the floor is yours.
Thanks for the invitation. And note to self, must shorten biography. Great, wonderful. No, lovely for whoever has been able to tune in this afternoon or wherever you are. It might be still morning. And yeah, rather than preparing a long slideshow or anything, I really feel more, because it's the afternoon here, I spent some time on the land watering the garden, and I feel more like a chat. But to start us off, I'm just wondering, well, I'll just ramble on a little bit with a few reflections on a few things that I feel are relevant to this theme of systems change. And one of them for me is timeframes. Like we sometimes talk about systems change with this impatient perspective of a single lifetime. And that makes us also feel sort of a little bit like the system isn't changing, and one day maybe we'll just build up the critical mass and then we'll change it. And what I have tried to tune into in my own life more and more is to actually see how the system has been changing actually all the time. And it's the same, this conversation that is now polarizing a bit about, is it too late? Will we have complete collapse, or can we turn breakdown into breakthrough? Many systems have been collapsing over long periods of time, and each collapse opens up new possibilities because old structures and patterns break down, and that enables us to reshape those patterns. And so for me, it just helps not to frame systems change and then from this to that. Similarly, and this is just a personal reflection, I would love to hear people's opinions on this. And it's another bit that I've been thinking about a lot lately is how even the paradigm shift framing that is so often also describing we're moving from this to that is a framing that too often falls into the pattern that if we look at humanity over the course of history, we get so annoyed and so stuck with the failures of the old system that is so persistent and just doesn't want to change, that when we actually do find the momentum for change, we then end up rejecting pretty much all of it for the new. And I think the question of what in the old system serves is actually a really useful one, because like there's this English idiom, throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I feel like humanity has too often, in search for the new system, thrown out the baby with the bathwater. And at the same time, I don't want to in the slightest build up a framing here that says we don't need radical transformative change. But like Sohail this morning in one of the first sessions of the summit said, move towards adaptive change and be ready for radical change. And I think that's quite a wise way of working, rather than necessarily assuming that radical change is imminent and or necessary, because revolutions are powerful, but they're also often bloody. They're often combined with a lot of trauma. And I don't know whether that's really serving us. And so the other thing that I wanted to share is like, what is this larger system change that I think we're going through? And for me, the framing of actually a coming home, of this notion of re-inhabiting, is at the center of it. Not just re-inhabiting, but actually coming back to the notion, as Claire said earlier, land as a commons. Even beyond that, it's not even that we don't own the land, but the land actually owns us. The land's there before us and the land's there after us. And all indigenous people have understood themselves as being owned by the land. So this deeper bioregional inhabitation is not just coming home to our places, to our communities, to our bioregions, but it's actually in the widest sense becoming conscious participants and expressions of those bioregions. And for me, that again, I'm just reflecting a few personal things that I live through in my own life, with regard to where do I put my energy? Do I spend time online weaving the global network because the global transformation is near and there's so many global problems and we need to respond to climate change and extinction emergency and all of those issues? Or do I focus my attention locally and build in place from the potential that is there? In some places, we're fortunate enough that there's a lot of potential. In others, situations are difficult, but potential is always there, because they're human beings living in community that can actually work miracles when they come together and get clear on what they want for their place. And so for me, I'm in a personal tension quite a lot, have been for quite a few years now, of do I focus on the immediate place, literally my neighbors? I've just moved onto a piece of land that I'm now stewarding, and I could put a lot of energy and attention on simply growing roots in this place now, opening up the fences, trying to get the neighbors to build an agroforestry system across this hill that is ultimately a community-supported agriculture scheme where we give our land into it and then maybe even employ part-time a farmer to help harvest from our land and then sell produce to the consumers. That's a big project. It's a worthy project. It's a project that in its minute details would build community. Similarly, if we all got together and tried to build our own decentralized renewable energy infrastructure and got rid of combustion engine cars and shared a few electric cars. And now probably somebody's going to go, well, electric cars aren't the solution. That's another bit of the framing of either or. Of course, electric cars are not the solution if we scale them to the idea that everybody has a car, or in the future, everybody should have a car. But in the transition, electric technologies and solar panels are better than fossil technologies and fossil energy. And so for me, I'm always trying to invite, where's the fertile middle ground? That's also what brought me to bioregions. I spent years working in the Ecovillage movement and working with Transition Town Network and looking at the radical localization, starting from a sort of self-sufficiency dream. And living in an eco-village, I realized how important the connection between places like that and the wider regions are. And so for me, really finding the right balance, I'm guessing it's 80-20, 80 local, 20 global. And that's probably the same for our re-regionalization of production and consumption. If we talk about the bigger systems change, of how do we bring our resource cycles into new ways of material cultures that actually are grown in place regeneratively, where the biomaterials we grow heal the ecosystems we inhabit. But if we propose that as a radical departure from any type of global trade, then we're also spending time in fighting each other and misunderstanding. But if we propose it as an 80-20 rule of trying to build local food sovereignty, local water sovereignty, local energy sovereignty, and then also maintain the global collaboration that enables whatever needs to still be brought in, or the enabling technologies to be global. So I think the future is going to be global with a very heavy slant towards the local and bioregional. And that's the world I'm hoping to build. Similarly, the whole conversation about the circular economy, people either dismiss it or they think it's the final solution. There are lots of nuances, and scale is one of them, that these circular economies only make sense if they are at the right scale. And the bioregion is crystallizing out as the most sensible scale. And the shift away from fossil materials, I think Richard Heinberg will talk about in his talk. And what's central to that is if we do biomimicry properly and we look at what elements life builds with, it builds with carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, with 4 elements of the periodic table. And we use pretty much the entire periodic table, including radioactive substances. And we need to come back to cycling just those 4 elements locally with renewable energy and meet our material needs that way. And when Claire said, and I'm going to end with that because I could go into lots of places, but I'd rather have some questions. Claire said, choose carefully which tools you use. And she was mainly refusing to online tools. And I like the way that she was highlighting that Hilo, while being a platform, was actually trying to focus bioregionally and locally, but it's still a virtual platform. And I think the choose your tools carefully also applies on choose when you use what tool, where you use it, and to what extent you use it. And then tool is basically every technology. How much do we precondition our day by the amount that we spend in front of Zoom calls? And how much do we, by opening these wonderful doors to this learning that we're currently doing together right now, right here, which is lovely. I've just closed the door to walking through the field with my neighbor. And we need to find the balance because both are important. And I think that the true systems change in the Bucky-Fuller sense of build the new system that makes the old system obsolete is to be found more at the local and the bioregional scale. But it's not, importantly, whenever somebody tries to frame these shifts in a radical, we're moving from all of this, leave it behind, to this, ask yourself, what's the middle ground? Which bits actually still enable? Because I would love to live in a world where we still have a little bit of global trade and where we have global collaboration between bioregions, where people spend some time exchanging around what works and what doesn't work in similar climate zones around the world, but where we do work from the uniqueness of place and culture. And that's why Designing Regenerative Cultures has a plural in the title. It's really important, that plural, because the culture comes out of place. There's a plural and there's a paradox in the culture, in the title, because you do not design culture. Culture emerges out of the sum total of relationships and interactions, out of the narratives and the stories in place, of the way that people rewrite themselves into the landscape and as landscape through their songs, dance, narratives, everything. That's why we also need the arts in this system change. And yeah, I hope we find the balance between the right use of technology, which I think is less than we do use now, and the right use of local and global. And I would love to hear what people think about it. Right.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's very refreshing to hear your perspectives. And the first thing that comes to mind for me is the question of how you think that this global pandemic has impacted this question. I mean, maybe it has made people feel more connected to place. And maybe there have been some new neural patterns being woven in minds and hearts. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, because I think on the one hand, it has driven us all more onto virtual communications. I think Zoom and Skype and all those platforms have had a massive increase since the pandemic started. But at the same time, it has shown how brittle global supply chains are and how long disruptions to supply chains actually continue to echo through the system. And I think of that, we haven't even seen the rest of it yet. That's still playing out. But it has also, I think, fast forwarded the transformation and the systems change that was already underway in the labor market or the way we work. I think that all people who are in large employment structures of big companies or public authority or so on, their employers used to be somewhat careful about letting people work from home because there was an assumption that people wouldn't work that much. Since they got forced and having to allow it, they realized that actually pretty effective teams and stuff can get done this way. And so I think that alone will lead to a transformation. Then I think lots of people have, I mean, it depends where you lived. Like where I was, we were invited into a very uncomfortable 51 nature deficit disorder experiment. Like I literally wasn't really allowed to go out into the streets. And I remember coming home from bringing recycling out and standing under a tree and realizing that I hadn't stood under a tree for 3 weeks. And I literally felt something rushing into me, just looking up at the leafage. And I think an embodied experience of how necessary deep nature connection is that you lose when you're stuck at home like that, has a lot of people are moving back to the countryside and at the moment, if they're privileged enough to be able to do so. And I feel it has triggered a new wave of back to the land, like we had in the 60s and 70s with the first eco-villages being founded. And then there was another boom in the 90s when the Global Ecovillage Network got founded. And I think this new back to the land movement would do well if it actually learned from the lessons and mistakes, but also the tools, the social technologies of the eco-village movement. And both like Global Ecovillage Network, Gaia Education have tried to share these tools for years. And I feel like right now is a time where people are hungry for that kind of information. How do I build community in place? Because it's complex. Claire mentioned a number of things earlier. It's about sociocracy, like decision-making tools, the social aspects. It's about learning how to work the land again and build soil and agroforestry and forest gardens and new food systems. But it's also about building new economic structures and like Michael Linton's work on circular money and different types of currencies. Some of them might be virtual, some of them might not be. All of that, I think, is now something that people have also through the pandemic learned to access quicker. Like one generation knew how to find their stuff on the internet already, of course, but the older generations, I think, have brushed up the internet skills. At least I see that in some, like my mother, for example, through the pandemic has become a bit more savvy. And that's also great because it allows for a more rapid spread of information.
Thank you so much. Your words are landing in very fertile soil. I've made the transition myself from a big system of government to becoming a forest therapist and connecting people to nature that way. So I'm wondering, for a person who has never heard about regenerative economies, for us, it's very easy to talk about regenerative leadership and so, but right now in this very moment, what would you advise a person to do in order to step into their regenerative authority to take back that story in their own lives?
Well, I like to see all of it as a coming back to life, and as a, like, I actually, that's also one way of framing this larger systems change that this summit is talking about. Ultimately, the diagnosis is there's an arrogant species, arrogant enough to call itself Homo sapiens, that has developed patterns that do not fit into the life-sustaining patterns of the planetary biosphere, of life as a planetary system. And either we realize as a species that our narratives have been mistaken and nature and culture are not separate. Culture is an epiphenomenon of nature. We are nature. We're expressing nature. And once we realize that, we understand the importance of how dependent we are on that very subtle process, and that our misbehavior has been tolerated for so long because the system was incredibly resilient, the planetary system, but we have eroded it so drastically over the last 250 years or even longer, that right now, if we don't realign into that regenerative community at nested levels of place that life actually is. Like, I had this wonderful conversation with Fridtjof Capra, where his long journey from being a physicist into basically being a biologist and writing this wonderful book on the systems view of life, ended up with the conclusion that life fundamentally is a regenerative community. And so our job is to fit back in, or as Janine Benyus put it, life creates conditions conducive to life, as the sort of some lesson of biomimicry. Well, we are life and we're capable of doing that, but we have to relearn it. And for me, this is where the big systems transformation will happen, when we refit at the appropriate scale into place again. And for me, that's local and bioregional. But that said, working regeneratively is ultimately also an alignment into working on oneself and working on one's community relationship in an evolutionary developmental way. It's letting go of the fact that you are a noun, and as Buckminster Fuller suggested, step into the fact that you're a verb, that you have choice and freedom to do things, and that you have agency in the system. That actually means no matter what you do or don't do, you are changing the world every day. You don't have a choice on that. The only thing is you can deny it and get on with it, or you can become a conscious participant in life. And that gives us both a huge responsibility and humility, because we can't predict and control all the outcomes that stem from our actions. But it also gives us the audacity that we are actually constantly changing the system, so we might as well try to participate appropriately and become systems healers and weavers between the system, reconnecting the system, reconnecting the unbroken whole. It's never been apart. It's only a part in our mind, but we are capable of weaving strands of meaning together. That's what I feel my work is about, and that healing is about, is also weaving this story into the ancient story again, not having the arrogance of saying that regenerative is something new. It isn't at all. It's an ancient story. Our entire species has evolved as regenerative, bioregionally focused beings in relationship with their ecosystem as stewards nurturing it. If you read Tyson Yunker Porter's wonderful book, Sand Talk, it shows how Aboriginal culture has carefully gardened a wild ecosystem, so that when the first white people arrived in Australia, they didn't see their agriculture because it was so sophisticated that it looked like a wild landscape, but it was a garden system. And we can refit into ecosystems in a similar way if we take that inner shift seriously. So it's aligning with what is my gift, understanding that, like, the uniqueness of each and every one of us, that we all have something to offer to this larger context that will enrich it. And by trying to tune into that, the way to express our individuality most fully is in service to the next larger whole. That's part of the notion of this regenerative nestedness of life, that you can only fully express your own essence by being of healing and supportive influence to the community, the ecosystem, the bioregion, and the planet that contains you. So it's actually an enlightened self-interest to heal the planet and heal ecosystems. And so, yeah, that's a long answer to your question.
Well, it's very enlightening and corresponds with this individuation theory, deep psychology with Carl Gustav Jung, talking about our inner life being in exact harmony with our outer life, that our pain and frustration can be used as teachers to realign us and reattune us to our essence, or our flower essence in a way, and our personal medicine that can be mirrored into our environment again. And like you say, it has a lot to do about pulling back the veils and dissolving anything that blocks us from feeling this connection. Another question is, as a regenerative leader, what are the most important tools that we can carry with us in this medicine kit, per se, for promoting embodied regenerative leadership in our environment?
But tools are important, but of course the danger is that you get stuck in one groove with one tool. Like the common saying of saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem becomes a nail. Even in terms of facilitating transformation, people get stuck with, it's this process. I mean, I've seen people beautifully transform just going through a Dragon Dreaming workshop with John Croft, or Joanna Macy's whole arsenal of tools in the work that reconnects is incredibly powerful and ancient, drawing on tantric Buddhist practice and systems theory over 40 years of her journey from initially these despair and empowerment workshops in the nuclear age to then what she then called deep ecology and the work that reconnects. I personally find all the tools that enable the system to perceive itself, that take us into a different quality of listening. So for me, one of the most powerful transformative experiences that you can guide people into in an embodied way is the way of counsel, particularly if you do it out in nature. It's relatively, it doesn't take that much to frame it in a way that people, as the talking stick passes, every person opens up a little bit more, giving permission, and that does something magic in the circle. The next person opens up more, and suddenly it becomes a collective healing, in the sense that you hear people voice stuff that you might not have shared with anybody. The pain, the frustration of where we're going as a species, the hope, the love, the deep yearning, but also the anxiety and fear, all of those things. But as they're spoken and as we share them, they actually nourish us. And similarly, you can in those forms, find yourself, and I'm speaking from kind of first experience. I've had experiences of voicing something in a council circle that when it was out, it felt like it grew in the circle for me. It suddenly, I was like, I can't believe I just said that. Where did that come from? And when you have that experience, you actually have an embodied notion of that there is something like collective intelligence that we can access, that the place, the people, the quality of listening, even the more than human community in that place can inform what is being spoken and can transform everybody in the presence. And so for me, yeah, it's just obviously I just went into a rabbit hole on council. I love council, but I also love doing vision quest, rite of passage type work, like the whole, again, honoring our indigeneity to life is for me more important. Like, yes, there's a lot of healing with regard to past wrongdoings and current wrongdoings towards indigenous people all around the planet. But I think in terms of the transformation, we should remember that we're all indigenous to life, because otherwise we build up another story of, oh, I'm indigenous and you're not. But in honoring these deep connections that indigenous people still have to place, we also need to remember that, like, through our entire history as a species, we were all indigenous and we all went through rites of passage. There's a point to a rite of passage. The rite of passage is, in many different cultures in different ways, about going from immaturity to maturity, meaning going from the state of asking the tribe and the mother and the parent and everybody kind of give me, I need it in early development as a child and a teenager. But then comes that point where we have to mature and we have to learn how to give, we have to learn how to contribute in and become members in that syntrophic community of life where we actually create shared abundance rather than just ask. And because we've left rite of passage behind as a culture, we get like car races at 3 o'clock in the morning down the center of a city as an initiatory rite of people that never got initiated, or whatever, drug taking, some forms of extreme sports. All of that is trying to look for the initiation that our cultures don't provide anymore. So I feel we need to bring back the tools of rites of passage, and all of that is not about leadership as being the leader. It's about enabling others to step into their own leadership. Leadership becomes a mantle, a cloak that every one of us can wear in the right moment for as long as needs to be, and then let go of it again, just like the talking stick.
That's a brilliant answer. Thank you so much. There's so much wisdom between the lines there. And I think by tools also coming back to that one deep breath and that one deep exhale to really tune in to the cellular memory that we have. We have this wisdom inside, but the world is so full of chaos that sometimes it's difficult to make sense of all the information we take in on a daily basis. There's a question from the audience here about your thoughts on the two loops model, which Meg Wheatley and Debbie Fries developed, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, I know so many two loop models. I don't know which one is being referred to. I mean, if the love and fear cycle could be it, but I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I can't answer unless it can be shared on screen, but I might not know it.
Okay. There's another question about human patterns of production and consumption. They're one part of the problem, but underneath these problems are the human desires and greed that drive those patterns. The wealthy won't give up their wealth, and the poorest desire wealth themselves. What can we do to deal with this issue?
change that narrative from which that question was framed. If I may be sort of bold in answering in that way. For me, that question is repeating a story that is somewhat outdated and was never really true. That that life's about competitive scarcity, and that you have to compete and somebody has to lose in order for others to win. It's literally, when we're talking about systems change, what we're ultimately talking is from shifting from a win-lose system, a zero-sum game, to a non-zero-sum game. But life is a non-zero-sum game. Life is the negentrophic force in the universe. We've told a story based on physics, and let that influence a kind of neo-Darwinist type of competitive storytelling that was also, Darwin at the time, somewhat justifying the inequalities of Victorian culture. And we look at life, we're trained in our biology classes to look at life as if the core driver is this competition. And while competition exists and it's useful in the system, I like to compare it to this idea that when you stand at the ocean and you're fascinated by the waves, they're full of energy, they clash together, they're loud, so they draw the attention. But when you actually tune into the ocean and you realize the ocean is vast and deep and so much bigger than the waves, that's about the proportion of life's symbiotic, networked, nested regenerative community structure, and the amount of competition that fine-tunes on the surface level between them. So for me, the minute we retell the story in alignment with life, and our aim is to make our places, our communities, and ourselves healthier as appropriate participants in this abundance generating process, we will actually, and this is precisely why we need the shift towards the regional and the local, because all of this sounds terribly abstract if you talk about it on a planetary. I love this thing that Bill Reed pointed out to me at one point, saying, you can't heal the planet, you can't save the planet, but you can heal places. And in the shift from the planetary to the local or bioregional, things become real. They stop being abstract. And it also immediately shifts us away from, what are the abstract core problems that we now have to face everywhere, and how do we find solutions to the problems, the problem-solving mindset, and shifts us towards what is the potential of people in this place to build a system that will help people in this place and the community of life in this place. And the minute we engage with that story, we create it, because that's the power of language, and that's the power of us being humans. We bring forth worlds together in relationship. So I see the world differently. That's the short answer.
I'm wondering, Daniel, as a rising and rooted elder in this growing community of change makers, I'm wondering about your own practice. When you wake up in the morning and as your day proceeds, what's your most important tool for checking in with yourself and deepening your own connection to nature?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to, after 20 some years of trying to manifest living on a piece of land, so I may learn how to live as that piece of land over the next decades, that I've just made that move. I've just found my place. My practice is beautiful now of meeting every morning the community, the 42 different species of trees on this piece of land, and walking around and seeing each tree, not labeling them, not saying, there's the ash, or there's another apple tree, but to meet each and every one of them. Before that, I came into connection of breath and planet and elements through living close by the sea and doing a lot of stand-up paddleboarding and chanting mantras. the blue medicine Buddha mantra is a very powerful entry point into setting intention. I mean, really, I believe deeply that just having an intention of saying, I belong to the earth, I am of this earth, I want to be in healing service to my community, to myself, and to life as a whole. Repeating that every morning creates a different future than not repeating it every morning. For me, the mantra is doing that. It's remembering my mission and letting me realign in that way. Another practice or framing of a practice that my friend May East gave me that I think is really powerful, because it reframes what it means to be an activist. And I'm sure that in a systems change summit, lots of activists are listening. And for me, the reframing of what am I choosing to activate with the power of my intention and the power of my actions is different than trying to oppose anything. It's about activating the new story, living in the new story. And yeah, that's but also because you call me an emerging elder of this, I also tried to tug on my mask of saying, when am I overstaying? Like maybe my role now is here locally, but my community, maybe I'm spending too much time on social media and on virtual conferences. So trying to listen in constantly of, is what I used to be still serving? And am I just repeating a pattern that is actually going to let me get stuck in a groove where I could serve better and in a different way and grow in my own story the next step if I did something completely else? And that constant practice of asking, because I mean the answer might be no, stick with it for a bit longer, but constantly checking in of what do I need to let go of to let come, has been maybe a bit of a, like, it hasn't made for an easy life, but it's been pretty central for me.
Thank you so much. I think you're touching upon something very, very fundamental here, which is the opening and closing of cycles, and knowing when to open a cycle and when to close one, and having witnesses that are there to kind of help you let go and witness that process as well. Teata vekanse. It's been great having you, and I hope that you feel that this time spent on the digital arena was valuable for you. I hope to hear more from you in the future, and thank you for contributing with your time to the Systems Change Alliance.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation with you, and it's lovely to see Richard again. It's been a long time since we said goodbye at Findhorn many years ago. So, hi Richard, and over